In the European continent during the Middle Ages, the Huns progress westward, sowing war and destruction wherever they go. The Kingdom of Burgundy fights for its survival, and now the king must unite with his troops to protect the borders. The region is shrouded in fog, causing the army to advance cautiously. They arrive at a village and find everything burned, with people and animals dead on the ground. Suddenly, a horse gallops, revealing an enemy soldier who was hiding. This man shoots an arrow at the king and escapes before they can capture him. Marshal Hagen runs to the king, but it is too late. He is dead. A funeral is held later in the capital. Hagen feels overwhelmed by guilt as he reflects on his childhood. When he was a child, he survived a terrible attack by a beast, which left him with only a few scars, and the king took him under his protection. Later, while Hagen trains, Princess Kriemhild consoles him, saying it wasn't his fault and that he is still part of the family. Soon, Prince Gunther ascends to the throne and calls a meeting to discuss the situation, as the kingdom is surrounded by enemies. They are desperate for allies, and Gunther decides that his sister will marry the king of Lombardy. Hagen delivers this news to Kriemhild, who agrees to fulfill her duty without hesitation, but it is evident that it saddens her. That night, during a storm, 11 armed men are seen camping near the gates. When Hagen goes to the wall to observe, he sees a shadow that whispers the words, "I know your scars," before it disappears. At dawn, the group crosses the gate, and the soldiers immediately surround them. Kriemhild watches from a distance and sees one of those knights altering his appearance. Gunther agrees to meet the leader and discovers that it is Siegfried, Prince of Casentine. Siegfried's parents and Gunther's were allies in the ancient wars. To everyone's surprise, Siegfried challenges Gunther to a duel. The guards immediately surround him to protect Gunther, and Siegfried agrees to remain as a guest. Alone, Kriemhild confides in Hagen about what she saw and wonders if that person is a malevolent spirit haunting people's dreams. She thinks her brother should have sent the group away. That night, Hagen observes the guests. A hooded figure stands out from the group and walks through the city, so Hagen follows. He corners her in an alley, but when he touches her shoulder, the figure reveals herself to be a pile of bags. Meanwhile, Siegfried drinks so much that he ends up vomiting in the street. Hagen approaches him and warns him to leave the kingdom. After that, Hagen goes to bed and continues to have nightmares. He sees the mysterious guest in the stable surrounded by blood and tells him that he is not afraid, explaining that the ancients took everything from him, including fear. The being claims to know Hagen's scars and how he acquired them, reviving a childhood memory about losing his parents during a dragon attack. The next morning, Hagen discovers that the hooded figure has been seen in the stables by the servants, and some horses have been found dead. The survivors are in panic, and Kriemhild tries to calm her beloved horse, but it breaks free and flees. Hagen and Kriemhild mount other horses and go after it. A chase unfolds through the forest until the horse stops by the river to drink. Kriemhild approaches and tries to caress it, but the horse gets scared again and injures her before escaping. Hagen tends to her wound while she admits that she is not happy about the upcoming marriage. Sometime later, Siegfried tells Gunther that he is traveling because the Queen of the Valkyries, Brunhild, called him in a dream. It is said that she has the power to cast spells on men around the world without needing to know them. The moment is tense, but suddenly Siegfried laughs, claiming the story is just a joke. He also complains about the lack of women at the table. That night, Siegfried invades Kriemhild's room. He tells her she is beautiful, but Kriemhild accuses him of disrespect and calls him a lost soul, forcing him to leave. Meanwhile, Hagen tells Gunther that he does not believe the marriage is a good idea and assures that his army is strong enough. Gunther trusts him and agrees to cancel the plan. He is also concerned about Siegfried's story, as he does not believe it to be a lie. The next morning, Gunther informs Kriemhild that she does not have to marry, and she hugs him out of happiness. The queen tells Hagen that her daughter was willing to make a sacrifice for the kingdom, and wonders if Hagen would also be capable of doing so. Later, Hagen is training with his soldiers when Siegfried appears with his men to train too. The fights seem more like a street brawl than night training. Siegfried forgets that it is not real and attacks one of his men, causing the others to pull him away while he laughs like a maniac. Then he asks the local soldiers for a new opponent, and Hagen steps forward. When Siegfried throws a spear at him, Hagen easily intercepts it. He warns that they are training for war and that Siegfried should play his games elsewhere. The moment is interrupted by the arrival of a horse carrying a lifeless body. A closer look reveals that it is a man from a settlement near the border, and he was found stabbed. Moments later, Gunther is informed that the Saxons and the Danes have turned against them. The capital is safe for now, but the rest of Burgundy will burn. Gunther is so desperate for allies that he asks Hagen to join Siegfried's group, even though Hagen disapproves of the idea. When Hagen goes to seek Siegfried, he sees the hooded figure slinking away and finds some items on the ground that seem to be part of a ritual. The hooded being finally reveals itself as Alberic and insists that he knows who caused Hagen's scars. Alberic explains that Siegfried fought the dragon alone and killed it. He bathed in its blood, which made him invulnerable. However, a leaf fell on his back and prevented the blood from touching that spot of skin. Therefore, it is Siegfried's only weakness. Alberic was hired to forge a sword with the dragon's bones. He yells at Hagen for allowing Siegfried to stay in the castle, commenting that they gave him what he has always wanted, a family. In the chapel, Gunther's prayers are interrupted by Siegfried and his men. He places his sword in Gunther's hand and says he will kill for him. When Hagen shows up to look for them, he finds Gunther announcing that Siegfried is now an ally. Later, Hagen says goodbye to Kriemhild before leaving for war. She asks why he saved her from the marriage, considering the kingdom needs allies, but Hagen refuses to answer. Kriemhild tries to mention the feelings between them, and Hagen asserts that he did it to protect the kingdom. However, she says that her home will never be safe. The next day, the army marches to war. When they stop to camp at night, Hagen discusses strategies with his men. He points out that the Saxons and the Danes are brave, but lack discipline, so they must take advantage of their chaos. Siegfried is bored and leaves the meeting to rest in the forest. Gunther joins him and asks about the Valkyrie story. Thus, Siegfried tells that the queen calls forth the warrior that exists in him. In the middle of the night, Siegfried rides out and attacks the enemy alone. At dawn, everyone is shocked to see him return with the head of the Saxon king. He explains that the Saxons are pursuing him and are chaotic without a leader, so they must take the opportunity to confront them. The army cheers and follows Siegfried into battle, ignoring Hagen's concerns. Soon, a fierce battle begins in the forest. Hagen kills any enemy that comes too close, but he is more interested in finding his king. Siegfried fights mercilessly and without armor, impressing everyone. The fight goes on, with both armies losing men on all sides. Hagen notices that his best archer is surrounded and tries to help, but a crowd of enemies also surrounds him. He can only watch as the archer is stabbed to death. This distraction allows an adversary to strike Hagen in the face, causing him to lose his left eye. Hagen immediately takes down the attacker, but collapses in the process. The Danish king comes after him, while Alberic watches from his corner. Siegfried suddenly leaps in and kills the king before he can reach Hagen, who passes out. When they return to the capital, the crowd cheers for Siegfried, grateful for the victory. Siegfried throws himself over them, enjoying the attention. Meanwhile, Kriemhild tends to Hagen, still unconscious. Frustrated, she goes in search of Siegfried and finds him drinking. She scolds him for disturbing the mourning of the fallen, but Siegfried replies that death is part of war. He believes the fallen warriors do not need to be honored in silence but celebrated. When asking about Hagen, Kriemhild admits that he may be dying. Siegfried then says Alberic can help him. Moments later, Alberic tends to Hagen's wounds, drawing a mysterious symbol on his body while revealing the truth. It turns out that Hagen's childhood story was a sham. Hagen comes from another kingdom that was attacked and conquered by Gunther's father. His parents were killed, and Hagen was trapped in the flames. The dragon that appeared actually saved Hagen by taking him in its claws and flying with him, explaining the scars. The king used the dragon to cover up what really happened. When Hagen finally wakes up, he visits the graves of the fallen soldiers. Siegfried tells him that he regrets nothing. Later in the throne room, Kriemhild finds Siegfried, who says empires always crumble and that they are not fighting for that, which is why he never wanted his father's throne. Kriemhild feels truly impressed by his lack of ambition. While changing Hagen's bandage, she expresses her gratitude to Siegfried for saving Hagen's life. However, Hagen suspects that Siegfried is creating false hopes in people. Kriemhild argues that false hopes can be better than no hope at all. In the following days, Hagen is heartbroken to see Kriemhild and Siegfried spending so much time together. One morning, they ride horses into the forest and admire the ruins of ancient wars. Kriemhild asks why Alberich follows Siegfried, and he replies that he killed Alberich's master. He also shares the story about the dragon. Siegfried became an apprentice blacksmith because his father wanted him to learn discipline. However, the blacksmith sent him to the valley in the hope that he would never return. After wandering for weeks, Siegfried found an asleep dragon and considered it the most beautiful moment of his life. Kriemhild cannot understand why he killed it, but Siegfried refuses to answer. On the way back, Kriemhild keeps hearing a voice calling her name. Siegfried tells her to ignore it, but Kriemhild turns around and sees her father's body covered in vines. She runs away in horror, and when Siegfried follows her, she admits that she is beginning to forget her father's face. He tried to sell her to a stranger, and for a time she hated him for it. She has an emotional breakdown, and Siegfried comforts her. Eventually, they come together and become intimate. After they fall asleep, Siegfried has a nightmare and almost kills Kriemhild, but wakes up in time. Meanwhile, the Huns continue their march westward under the leadership of Zell, spreading death and destruction wherever they go. Gunther is informed that Lombardia has fallen, and he despairs for more allies. Remembering Siegfried's story, he decides they must contact Queen Brunhild of Iceland. A council member brings this news to Hagen, disapproving of the idea. Brunhild is part of the ancients who used black magic and were cast out of the land. The council member explains that Gunther heard the queen in his dreams and believes it to be a trap by Alberich, so he locked her up. Hagen decides to see Alberich and promises to free him if he shares information about the Valkyrie queen. Alberich explains that Brunhild is invincible and that Siegfried was drawn to that. He kept hearing her voice in his dreams and decided to visit her. The queen grew fond of him and they spent a year together. But one day, Siegfried vanished without warning and broke her heart. Alberich believes that Siegfried still loves her. When Hagen opens the cell to free him, Alberich disappears. The next day, Hagen tells Kriemhild not to trust Siegfried, but she ignores his warning and announces that she will marry Siegfried to protect the kingdom. Making a worried expression, Hagen brings the news to Gunther and asks him to establish a condition. During dinner, Gunther gives his blessing to the couple, but with a condition. He says Siegfried must guide him to Iceland so Gunther can ask the queen for her hand in marriage. Thus, the Valkyries would also become their allies. Siegfried is furious but has no choice but to agree. Soon, Gunther and his men set sail on a ship. The first days of sailing are calm, but eventually, the cold begins to complicate things. One night, a storm surprises them, and the crew struggles to keep the ship under control, while Siegfried laughs. Unfortunately, the ship hits some rocks, and several men fall into the water, including Gunther. The next morning, Hagen reaches the shore and is devastated to find the bodies of his friends. At least Gunther is okay, and they reunite in an embrace. After finding Siegfried and some survivors, the group continues their journey on foot. They travel for days until they reach a foggy area. Remembering the rules of his last visit, Siegfried makes everyone put down their weapons. Soldiers surround them, and Siegfried asks General Senua to take him to the queen. The group is bound and taken to a castle beneath a volcano. As they cross the gate, locals scream at them and begin to beat them. Bags are placed over their heads as they lose consciousness. When Hagen wakes up, his bag is removed, and he finds himself in a large room with Senua. She explains that to win the queen's hand, Gunther will have to defeat her in battle. Many have tried in the past, and their skulls are piled nearby. Then Hagen has a chance to see Gunther, who possesses a sword that the queen gave him. He clarifies that she does not resemble what the stories say, and that he will have to fight her. Meanwhile, Siegfried receives a visit from Queen Brunhild, who also gives him a sword. Sometime later, the group gathers outside the castle, and Hagen scolds Siegfried for not warning them about the rules. Hagen wants to leave, but Gunther announces that he wishes to stay. Even Siegfried protests, claiming that even he cannot defeat Brunhild. Gunther refuses to change his mind, so Siegfried calls Alberic for help. They enter a cave, and Alberic collects Siegfried's blood by cutting his weak point. Then he pushes Hagen and Siegfried underwater while Gunther drinks the blood. He starts to writhe in pain, only to sigh in relief when the two drown. It turns out Gunther temporarily gained Hagen's and Siegfried's strength. Possessed by newfound vigor, Gunther is prepared for battle by the guards. Sinua warns him that if his blood touches the snow, the queen will take his head. If her blood touches, she will leave with him. Then Gunther finally fights Brunhild, who reveals herself to be an exceptional warrior, quickly knocking off his helmet. He surprises her by blocking or deflecting her attacks, providing a good fight. After several minutes of confrontation, blood finally falls in the snow. To everyone's surprise, it comes from a cut on Brunhild's leg. Gunther immediately calls forth the power for Hagen and Siegfried to waken the cave. Brunhild and her army kneel, determined to fulfill their part of the bargain. When it is time to leave, Brunhild bids farewell to her land in tears. Eventually, the group returns to Burgundy, and Gunther is devastated to learn that his army was unable to hold the borders. The Huns have destroyed much of the kingdom. Soldiers are deserting, and men in the villages are hiding to avoid being drafted. As they urgently need the strength of their allies, a double wedding is held. Siegfried and Kriemhild are happy to marry, while Brunhild and Gunther appear cold. Later, while everyone prepares for battle, Brunhild deals with her frustration by attacking Siegfried. She beats him before the entire army before screaming in rage. On the night before the great battle, Hagen realizes that his soldiers are fearful and hopeless. He gives a speech to inspire them, urging them to follow the queen, for she will protect them. At dawn, the army sees Brunhild's volcano erupting in the distance and considers it a positive sign. When the battle begins, Brunhild charges, and no one hesitates to follow her. The fight is fierce, and soon death covers the entire field, but Brunhild's leadership still leads her team to victory. Zell watches her, impressed by her overwhelming power, and has no choice but to retreat. At night, a great feast is held to celebrate the victory. As everyone dances and drinks, Brunhild and Siegfried dance together a lot and eventually leave, being seen by Hagen. The next morning, Hagen notices that Brunhild and Siegfried are still openly flirting. Hagen approaches Siegfried privately and states that he will tolerate this on the battlefield, but Siegfried must remain loyal to Kriemhild when they return. Siegfried hugs him and promises to take good care of the princess. In the following weeks, the kingdom celebrates peace once more and focuses on reconstruction. However, Siegfried grows bored and asks Kriemhild to run away with him. Kriemhild refuses, stating that she belongs to this place. Later, Kriemhild asks Hagen why he never married, and he insists he had more important things to do. They share a sweet moment, knowing they will never be together. In the throne room, Gunther discovers that his people are still losing hope due to the lack of workforce to tend the farms. Siegfried intervenes to help, but Gunther hates that the locals prefer him and scolds him for interrupting. Later, Gunther tells Hagen that he is worried about Brunhild, as she ignores him but looks affectionately at Siegfried. He demands the truth about what happened, but Hagen insists they only fought side by side. One night during dinner, Siegfried is very rude to one of the counselors and intimidates him until he leaves. An enraged Gunther yells at Siegfried, telling him he still has not become a true family. When Siegfried tries to start a fight, Hagen interrupts him. Later, Gunther sees Brunhild leaving the castle on horseback and follows her. The next morning, Gunther tells Hagen that Brunhild and Siegfried have been meeting in secret. The people continue to adore Siegfried, but he comes and goes without caring about anyone's feelings. Gunther does not want Siegfried to destroy the family, so Hagen agrees to do whatever the kingdom needs. Meanwhile, Siegfried apologizes to Kriemhild, but continues to get drunk in taverns and provoke fights. One day, Hagen invites Siegfried to go hunting, and together they take down a white deer. Hagen has many opportunities to kill Siegfried with a surprise attack, but does not dare. Instead, he hands a sword to Siegfried and asks for a fair fight. Both are great warriors and continue to fight for several minutes. They manage to disarm each other and exchange punches. After some struggle, Hagen holds Siegfried's head underwater, but the man soon wounds him in the leg. The battle continues, and Siegfried knocks Hagen down, placing his sword against his neck. When he is about to kill him, Gunther surprises him and fatally wounds him at his weak point, finally ending his life. Then Hagen tells Gunther to move forward, for no one must know he was there. He notes that Alberic watched everything, but when he approaches the shadow, he sees only a tree. Hagen returns to the city with Siegfried's body, saying he defeated him in a duel. Kriemhild has a breakdown when revealing that she is pregnant. Privately, Brunhild also collapses. During the funeral, Hagen defends what he did to protect the kingdom, but is open to punishments from the princess. However, instead of exterminating him, Kriemhild curses him to live long enough to serve Siegfried's son, which will make him suffer more than death.